Well, thanks for tuning in to the Tuesday edition of the World Report. I'm Arjun, and here's what's making headlines around the world. Our top focus today: India is close to finalizing an interim free trade agreement with the United States, sources have told NDTV Monday evening. They've also said an announcement is in fact expected by September or October. Meanwhile, Indian negotiators returned from the US Saturday after a fifth round of talks. NDTV Profits Rishabh gets you the latest.
What we're picking up on the latest that's happening in the India-US trade talks is the fact that the only sort of concrete goalpost that we're seeing for any agreement to come out is the September-October fall deadline that was announced by the two leaders way back in February. Now, earlier it was thought that some sort of a mini trade deal or an interim trade deal will be reached by July 9th. Then that July 9th deadline shifted to August 1st. But what we're seeing right now is that there is no sort of indication whether or not a mini trade deal will be done in the next 8 days or so. What we're seeing is that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has also said that a bunch of deals will be coming, but they are not sort of doing any of them in haste. What we're also seeing from the Indian side is that Piyush Goyal has come out and said that deadlines and trade deals are not negotiated under any sort of deadline. So what we're seeing is that these trade talks might be now extended till the first tranche, which will come out of this trade deal, and then a second tranche, a larger tranche, will come out. Remember, a negotiating team from the US is expected in August second half.
Shifting our focus to Kerala, where the British Royal Navy's F-35B fighter jet, which had been in fact stranded in Thiruvananthapuram for over a month after making an emergency landing, flew out of the Trivandrum airport this morning. Now, the stealth jet had been grounded in Kerala due to a hydraulic fault that took an expert team from the UK, in fact, to repair it. Now, the fighter received a green signal yesterday, allowing it to return to the skies after 5 long weeks. Visuals this morning showed the aircraft taking off from the Trivandrum airport. At least 27 people were killed and over 160 injured when a Bangladesh Air Force plane hit a school and a college campus in Dhaka on Monday. Meanwhile, a high-level Air Force committee has been established to probe the matter. The crash in Bangladesh comes just a month after a deadly Air India crash in Gujarat's Ahmedabad, which killed 260 people. The Gatwick-bound Air India plane crashed seconds after taking off into a medical college campus near the airport. The UK government will begin enforcing the first phase of immigration reforms from today. Now, this comes as part of its wider policy agenda outlined in the immigration white paper titled Restoring Control over the Immigration System. Now, the measures aimed at reducing net migration also include a narrower list of sponsor-eligible jobs and a ban on overseas hiring in the care sector. The white paper, published on the 12th of May, signals the government's intent to make it more difficult to move and to settle in the United Kingdom. Though a white paper does not itself change immigration laws, several of its proposals are already being actioned through changes to the immigration rules. Over in Boston, Harvard University has urged a federal judge to restore a $2.6 billion in research funding frozen by the Trump administration. Now, the government claims Harvard allowed anti-Semitism to in fact flourish on campus and pulled funding under a new executive order. But Harvard argues that the move is political retaliation, not policy, and threatens vital medical and scientific research. Judge Alanson Burroughs questioned the government's evidence, calling the move mind-boggling and also warning of potential free speech violations. The case has meanwhile triggered national attention, with Harvard alumni and even researchers warning of lasting damage to education and public health. A ruling, meanwhile, is expected soon. And the Kremlin is leaving the door open for a possible meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump in Beijing this September. For record, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says a Putin-Trump talk could in fact happen if POTUS attends China's military parade on the 3rd of September, marking 80 years since the end of the World War II. Putin's attendance is already confirmed, by the way. Now, Trump has reportedly been invited, but there's no official word on whether he'll go from Washington. Meanwhile, there's also a buzz about a possible trilateral summit with China's President Xi, but Beijing has confirmed nothing. Peskov added a future Putin-Trump meeting would need serious planning. Now, this speculation follows recent Trump-Xi and Trump-Putin calls, mostly focused on the Ukraine war, where China, in fact, also continues to call for peace and dialogue. And if this happens, it would be the first face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin since 2018. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the next set of peace talks between Ukraine and Russia is planned to be held in Turkey tomorrow, after previous rounds of talks to end the war failed to yield consecutive results. Now, this comes as Europe has promised more air defense systems and ammunition for Kiev hours after Ukraine was hit by another barrage of Russian drones and missiles overnight. My colleague Mohammed Ghazali joins me for the latest. Ghazali, we've seen first 2 rounds of talks being held in Istanbul. Will it be the same song and dance all over again, or should we expect something different this time?
See, during this round of talks, it will focus on prisoner exchanges, which has happened even in the past after those 2 rounds of talk in Istanbul. But even in this round of talk, there will be an attempt to ensure that Zelensky and Putin have a meeting in the coming days. Now, which looks very unlikely because Moscow has already hinted that there will be no concession as far as the war is going, as far as the war is concerned between the two countries. But it also reflects the carrot and stick approach of the United States as well, which keeps arming Ukraine and on one side keeps threatening Russia with sanctions, and also holds talks or sends a signal that it wants the war to end between the two countries.
Well, thank you so much for getting us the latest there, Ghazali. Shifting focus now, Geeta Gopinath, the number 2 official at the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, will leave her post at the end of August to in fact return to Harvard University. The IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, will name a successor to Gopinath in due course of time, the IMF has said. And after a delay of over 15 months, the Indian Army finally received the first batch of the Apache AH-64E attack helicopters, marking a significant step towards bolstering its combat capabilities along the western border. Now, this comes in the wake of Operation Sindoor, viewers. The Indian Army had signed a $600 million deal with the United States in 2020 for 6 Apache attack helicopters, with delivery initially expected between May and June 2024. That's last year. However, repeated delays due to supply chain disruptions and also technical issues faced by the US pushed the delivery timeline to December 24. 22 Apaches are with IAF currently. Now its Army gets 3. US hotel hiring managers ordered more background checks in the first half of 2025 compared with the same period in 2024. Now, this amid growing scrutiny on foreign-born workers in the hospitality industry. This is according to a leading human resources and recruitment management company. Meanwhile, in June, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security said it was reversing guidance issued that immigration and customs enforcement agents were not, in fact, to conduct immigration raids at farms, hotels, and even restaurants. Donald Trump has sought to end temporary legal status for hundreds of thousands of migrants in the U.S. and has vowed to deport millions of undocumented people across the country. And news from the land down under, where Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke said on Tuesday that the slaughter has to end in Gaza after 28 countries, now this includes Britain, Japan, and a host of European nations, issued a joint statement Monday saying that the war in Gaza must end now. Now, it marked the latest sign of allies sharpening language as Israel's isolation only deepens. Burke told the Australian Broadcasting Corp in Canberra that the images of destruction and killings coming out of Gaza are indefensible. Listen in.
on our own, Australia is not a loud voice or a decisive voice on the other side of the world. But when you can make a statement together with so many other significant powers, then we're all hoping that there'll be something that'll break this. We've seen too many images of children being killed, of horrific slaughter, of churches being bombed. The images that we've seen have been pretty clear that so much of this is indefensible, and as that statement referred to, aid being drip-fed in. None of this changes the fact that the hostages need to be released. Of course that needs to happen.
New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters has called for an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in remarks Tuesday following his government's endorsement of the joint statement by 28 countries calling for an end to the war. Foreign ministers of countries, also including Australia and Canada, said the suffering of civilians in Gaza has reached new depths. They condemned the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of food and water. Listen in.
The international community is joined by an overwhelming majority of Israelis and Palestinians in wanting an immediate ceasefire. That is understandable because only a negotiated ceasefire offers the best hope of bringing Israeli hostages home and of ending the immense suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza.
A federal judge on Monday sentenced a former Kentucky police officer to nearly 3 years in prison for using excessive force during the deadly Breonna Taylor raid 5 years ago, rebuffing a U.S. Department of Justice recommendation of no prison time for the defendant. Brett Hankson, who fired 10 shots during the raid but did not hit anyone, was the only officer on the scene charged in the black woman's death back in 2020. Now, he's the first person sentenced to prison in the case that rocked the city of Louisville and spawned weeks of street protests over police brutality in 2020. Now, he's been sentenced to 33 months in prison as well as 3 years of supervised probation. Hankinson will not report directly to prison. Jennings said the Bureau of Prisons will determine where and when he starts his sentence. Sticking with the US, where San Francisco is set to ban homeless people from living in RVs by adopting strict rules the mayor's office says are necessary, in fact, to keep neighborhoods free of many RV camps that block sidewalks with power generators to everything like trash. Now, the policy up for final approval by city supervisors Tuesday targets recreational vehicles with a new 2-hour citywide parking limit on large vehicles and a permit registry program to help residents find and move into housing. There are at least 400 recreational vehicles doubling as shelter for struggling households, including immigrants and families with young children. The Board of Supervisors is expected to give final approval to Mayor Daniel Lurie's RV proposal Tuesday. The proposal first cleared the board last week, with 2 of 11 supervisors voting against it. The 2025 high-level political forum got underway in New York on Monday with Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressing that the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine are pushing the Sustainable Development Goals further out of reach. Guterres described the perils the world faces, including a slowdown of global economy, heightened tensions over trade, and much more. Here's more.
The global economy is slowing. Trade tensions are rising, inequalities are growing, aid budgets are being decimated while military spending soars, and mistrust, division, and outright conflicts are placing international problem-solving system under unprecedented strain. We cannot sugarcoat those facts, but we must not surrender to them either. The SDGs still are within reach if we act with urgency and ambition.
The Cast Cave tour has boomed among Chinese and foreign tourists to beat the summer heat in the National Forest Park in central China's Hunan province. The Yellow Dragon Cave is one of the foremost attractions in the national park and is world reputed as a wonderland. Known as the all-round champion among all other cast caves in China, Yellow Dragon Cave has typical karst landform that can amaze all travelers. As you see on the screens right there, the total area of the bottom of the cave has proved to be 100,000 square meters and 7.5 kilometers long. The cave keeps constant temperature of about 16 degrees Celsius year-round. A humpback whale was found dead on the shore of Rio de Janeiro in the early afternoon on Monday, drawing attention from beachgoers and prompting a response from local authorities as well. Now, the carcass was first spotted drifting close to Rio's West area beaches in the morning and reached São Conrado in the afternoon, carried by an ocean current. Humpback whales for perspectives are typically seen along the coast of Rio de Janeiro between June and November, with peak sightings usually from July to September. Around 25,000 humpback whales, in fact, make a 4,000-kilometer journey feeding areas in Antarctica to northeast Brazil.
Eu senti muita tristeza, porque eu gostaria de ver uma baleia viva, né? Meu sentimento foi de tristeza, de ver um filhote de baleia morto, que deve ter se perdido da família e veio parar aqui em São Conrado.
Tourists have been marveling at the spectacle of Iceland's latest volcanic eruption. That's correct. Drone footage shows lava spewing out of the crater on Monday. The latest eruption began on the 16th of July and in fact resulted in the forced evacuation of local residents and the internationally known Blue Lagoon geothermal spa. Now, Grandavik has been repeatedly affected by the activity since 2023 November, when a volcano in the area came to life after lying dormant for some 800 odd years. Listen in.
It's always a little scary when there's an eruption, of course. But this one is not threatening like we talked about. So being able to go and see it is really amazing and once in a lifetime experience for sure.
And following the recent attacks across Japan, the police in Tochi prefecture, approximately 100 kilometers north of capital Tokyo, and the local hunters club conducted a bear drill on Monday. The exercise was conducted in a mountainous area in which police demonstrated how to scare off wild bear using fireworks. Now, according to local police, there have been 3 sightings of wild bears reported this year in Tokichi prefecture. A 52-year-old newspaper delivery man, in fact, died on the 12th of July after he was mauled by a bear in Fukushima, southern Hokkaido. The following week, a male brown bear was shot dead in the town, and based on a DNA test, it was determined that it killed the delivery man and a woman, her 70s, 4 years ago. On Monday, a farmer was also attacked by a wild bear in Akita prefecture, which lies, in fact, in the north of Japan. A newly unveiled Department of Justice internal investigation charges that the FBI sloppily investigated Hillary Clinton's 2016 email server scandal, resulting in an incomplete probe. Now, the politically devastating investigation into the then presumed Democratic presidential nominee was ended in 2016 after then FBI Director James Comey announced that his agency would not recommend charges for Clinton after she used a personal server to store government emails. An infraction, in fact, many Republicans argued was indeed a crime. But an internal review of the FBI's investigation that finished in 2018 by the DOJ's Office of the Inspector General, or the OIG, has found that not every stone was in fact unturned. The Trump administration has released over 240,000 pages of FBI files on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. despite strong opposition from his family and also the civil rights groups he once led. The documents detail decades of surveillance and harassment by the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, targeting King's personal life and also his political work, part of the now infamous COINTELPRO campaign. King's children, meanwhile, called the release deeply personal, urging the public to handle it with empathy and respect. The files were originally sealed until 2027, but the Trump White House pushed for early release, citing transparency and deflecting heat over other controversial record disclosures like the Epstein files. But it's time we step into a short break. We'll be back with much more. Welcome back. You're watching the World Report. Now on to stories from the business purse, where the US retailer Costco Wholesale Corporation will open its first technology center in India in Hyderabad, as per reports. Now the Global Capability Center, handling technology and research operations and working alongside global teams, will initially employ 1,000 people and scale up, reports added. India is already home to some of the global marquee brands having their GCC operations within the country. Now, this includes companies such as JP Morgan Chase, Walmart and Target in Bengaluru, while Hyderabad also hosts companies such as McDonald's, Heineken and Vanguard Corporation. The finals of the 2025 RoboCup Humanoid League, part of the world's most prestigious robot competition, concluded on Sunday in Brazil, with Tsinghua University's Hepastas team beating China's Agricultural University's Mountain Sea team 5-2 to in fact clinch the title. Now China has made history by winning the gold for the first time in the 28-year history of the tournament's humanoid adult-size soccer competition. Unlike in previous editions, Chinese teams showed dominant form from the group stage onwards. Now the robot, powered by the domestically developed T1 humanoid robot with an accelerated evolution design, overwhelmed opponents with multiple clean sheet victories, including 16-0, 9-0 and 12-0 triumphs over UT Aston Villa from the United States. Jasprit Bumrah will take the field at Old Trafford in the fourth test of the Anderson Tendulkar Trophy. His bowling partner Mohammad Siraj said 2 days out from the match. Now, Bumrah's availability has hovered over each test like a weather watch, shaped by a pre-series agreement that India's pace spearhead would play only 3 of the 5 games to manage his workload. But with India trailing 1-2 and the series slipping into its decisive phase, his inclusion in the Manchester test feels less like a decision and more like a certainty. The 9-day gap since the finish at Lord's on the 14th of July has only strengthened the case. 19-year-old IM Divya Deshmukh has reached the semi-finals of the FIDE Women's World Cup after winning All India tie-break clash with GM Harika Dronavalli 2-0. Now, Divya dominated an impressive first game before Harika came very close to hitting back in the next. When she couldn't, however, it was Divya who was through to play a semi-final against her Chinese opponent. Meanwhile, it's GM Li Qingshe versus GM Kuneru Humpy in the other semi-final.